Hello, welcome to today's Tuva Science Connection, where we're going to be exploring texting and how it relates to sensing and responding. And this plays into or sort of helps us get at the performance expectation of 4LS1-2, where our students are working to use a model to describe how animals, or an animal, receive different types of information through their senses, process that information in their brain, and respond to the information in different ways. And so we can think about getting at this of like different ways. What does that mean? Okay, so is that among different individuals? Is that different senses that are coming in? And we can use something that many of our students are familiar with, or at least aware of, which is texting on the phones. Either they themselves are doing it, or a lot of the parental and adult units in their lives are on phones, using phones, texting with information. And so we can look at a study that looked at reaction times to an auditory response, that information coming in using their senses, and ask questions like, are auditory reaction times same when you're texting versus when you're not texting? Or do these two students in this study have similar or different auditory responses to get at that? So what we'll be doing is we'll be using this data set, the texting reaction times from Tuva, to explore these data, or to explore these questions, excuse me. And let's orient a little bit to the data. What do we have? Well, these data were produced by the University of Maine Hutchinson Center Summer Camp, Science Camp. And within it, we have 40 cases, so 40 times that the students were collecting information within this experiment. And then we recorded 3 attributes of information as they were going through the study. So let's look at what those attributes are. So we have the student who was involved in the study. We have the reaction time. So a sound was made, and how long did it take before they could respond by hitting a buzzer that they had heard the sound? And then we have the qualifier of, were they texting or not when they heard that sound? So our first question is, right, how do those auditory reaction times change? So we can look at, so we're interested in reaction time, so we can drag that to our x-axis, and we're interested if it's similar or different between texting and not texting. So we can take our texting and not texting variable, and just to help us see it a little bit, let's color it by this texting and not texting, so we can really have a sense of what we're looking at. Big fan of color, always using that to our advantage. Okay, so when we first look, we can see, these data points are kind of spread out, but let's add some reference lines to give ourselves kind of an even better way to kind of eyeball what's going on. And we can change the color. Let's get it to sort of match up with what these lines are. So when they're not texting, it looks like their reaction time ranges from about 0.16 seconds to about 0.41 seconds, right? We're getting some information to help us better eyeball using the data to be able to answer this question. And so here we can add, I'll put in these annotations, these reference lines to help us kind of get a sense of this range for when they are texting. So when they are texting, it looked like within this study for these 2 students, it took about 0.26 seconds to respond. That was the quickest that they responded while they were texting, versus all the way up to 0.63 or 0.64 seconds, right? So right here, from looking at the data and from adding these visual annotations, we can start to get a sense of kind of what were the ranges of reaction times, how those differed in different situations, texting and not texting. Were they distracted as they were hearing that stimulus come in that their senses were picking up on? But then our next question was, how is that similar or different across these students that were doing this? Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these reference lines because we're going to change our variable. We want to look at students now, not whether or not they were texting here on the y-axis. So I'm going to drag our students over here, and we can take a look. Oh, so interesting. So there were differences among our students, and at first glance, it looks like Margot had all of the really quick reaction times within the data set, whereas Treva had the slower reaction times in the data set. So overall, Margot was a bit faster than Treva. Now, there's an awful lot of overlap between these two and their reaction times, but it is interesting. There's some differences in what we see in terms of their reaction times. And so this was just kind of a quick way to get a sense of what's going on for these two questions. Are auditory reaction times the same when you have another distractor, when there's another sense that's being used, right? When we're texting, our eyes, our sight is engaged, and then we're trying to hear and respond to the hearing with a tactile sense, right? So there's three senses involved. And it seems like from these data that the reaction times are generally faster when we don't have those extra distractions. This is just information to kind of give us a better sense of kind of what might be going on in the brain and how might these sort of stimulus response reaction times be bouncing around up there. Our second question, right, do the students have similar or different? Well, we saw, right, they were different. So even among individuals, there were differences, even when the general pattern of faster when not distracted versus slower when distracted. And we can use these data, as I said, it's something they're familiar with, they've seen people text, and we could use it as sort of a starting point of, what does that mean? Like what implications might that have as we're texting and things like that? So this was just a quick look at one of the many life science opportunities where you can make science connections using data. I encourage you to go to the Tuva Science Content Library to check them out for more performance expectations or to search by your topics. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy playing with your data.